The massive Scifi warship loomed above the human diplomatic vessel, its dark, sleek body stretching across space like the shadow of a giant beast. Inside the human ship, Commander Elias Vance stood in the airlock, adjusting the collar of his formal uniform. He had faced death before, but this mission was different. It was not a battle of weapons. It was a battle of words, courage, and survival. The Scifi were known across the galaxy as an ancient and powerful species. Their technology was centuries ahead of humanity's, and their empire controlled hundreds of star systems. They had crushed other civilizations with ease, and now they were deciding humanity's fate. Elias had been chosen for this mission because he was different from the diplomats who had come before him. He was not just a negotiator. He was a soldier, a survivor, and a man who refused to break under pressure. The last 3 envoys sent to the Scifi had failed miserably. One was sent back in pieces. Another was never heard from again. The third was returned with a simple message: humanity has nothing of value. Prove us wrong. Now it was Elias' turn to stand before the Scifi queen and change their minds. The airlock hissed open. A group of Scifi warriors stood waiting. They were tall, at least 7 feet, with slender but powerful bodies covered in armor-like exoskeletons. Their 4 glowing eyes studied Elias with unreadable expressions. Their long, clawed fingers gripped strange, curved weapons that hummed softly, as if hungry for combat. One of the warriors gestured forward. "Come. The queen is waiting." Elias stepped into the Scifi ship, his boots echoing against the metallic floor. The air was strangely warm, carrying the scent of unknown spices and something faintly metallic. As he walked through the massive corridors, he noticed glowing symbols pulsing along the walls, shifting in color like a living thing. After a few minutes, he arrived at a towering golden door. It opened with a deep, rumbling sound. Inside was the throne hall, a vast chamber filled with Scifi nobles and warriors. Their bioluminescent skin markings shimmered in complex patterns, as if speaking a silent language. They stood in 2 massive rows, all watching him with a mix of curiosity and suspicion. At the far end of the hall sat Queen Siraxa. She was unlike any Scifi he had seen before. Taller, more regal, and more fearsome, her body was covered in deep sapphire blue exoskeleton armor, smooth and elegant. Her 4 eyes glowed with a golden hue, sharp and intelligent. A long, flowing mantle of silk-like material cascaded down her shoulders, adding to her majestic presence. Elias did not bow. Instead, he stood straight, meeting her gaze with calm confidence. He knew that showing weakness would mean immediate failure. For a long moment, the hall was silent. The Scifi nobles whispered among themselves, their expressions unreadable. Then Siraxa spoke. Her voice was deep and smooth, carrying both power and mystery. "You are different from the others." Elias nodded. "The others came begging for peace. I did not come to beg." A few of the nobles hissed in disapproval, but Siraxa raised a hand, silencing them. A small, curious smile touched her lips. "Then why are you here, human?" Elias took a step forward. "Because I believe humanity and the Scifi Empire can be more than enemies. We can be allies." The nobles laughed. A few warriors even stepped forward, their weapons humming louder. To them, the idea was ridiculous. Humanity was small, weak, and insignificant compared to the mighty Scifi. Siraxa, however, remained silent, watching him carefully. "And what does humanity have to offer that the Scifi would find valuable?" Elias smiled slightly. "Survival." The laughter died down. Some of the nobles narrowed their eyes, confused by his answer. Elias continued, his voice steady. "We have fought for every inch of space we own. We do not have your advanced technology, but we adapt. We learn. We survive against impossible odds. Even now, you threaten to destroy us, yet we still stand. You may be stronger, but strength alone does not decide the future." For the first time, Siraxa leaned forward, her glowing eyes studying him carefully. She seemed intrigued, perhaps even impressed. Then, after a long pause, she spoke again. "Very well, human, you will prove your worth." She raised a hand, and the golden doors behind Elias slammed shut. The atmosphere in the room shifted. The warriors stepped back, their expressions unreadable. Elias kept his expression calm, but his instincts were on high alert. "And how will I do that?" Syrax's lips curved into a mysterious smile. "A test." The hall darkened, and the floor beneath Elias began to shift, revealing a massive open arena below. Strange, alien creatures lurked in the shadows, their eyes glowing in the dim light. The scent of ozone and danger filled the air. "You will enter the trial of worthiness," Syraxa declared. "If you survive, humanity will have a place among us. If you fail—" She did not finish the sentence. She didn't need to. Elias took a deep breath. He had expected a challenge, but this was beyond anything he had imagined. Still, he refused to back down. With a slow nod, he stepped toward the edge of the arena. If humanity's survival depended on this test, then he would not fail. The test was not just about fighting. It was about strategy, endurance, and survival. A Xilari warrior in dark armor stepped forward and spoke in a cold voice. "The trial begins now." The floor beneath Elias gave way. He dropped into the arena, landing on his feet with a sharp breath. His instincts took over immediately. He rolled forward, avoiding a set of jagged spikes that shot up from the ground where he had just stood. The crowd above roared in excitement. Elias scanned his surroundings. The arena was a maze of stone pillars, shifting walls, and deadly traps. The air shimmered with hidden energy fields, and strange symbols pulsed on the walls. But the real danger was what lurked in the darkness. Then he heard it. A low growl echoed through the arena. Something was coming. From the shadows, a massive beast emerged. It was like nothing Elias had ever seen before. 6 legs, armored plates covering its body, and long, venomous fangs dripping with a glowing blue substance. Its red eyes burned with hunger. The Xilari nobles cheered. They had seen this beast tear apart warriors stronger than Elias. To them, his fate was already decided. But Elias was not like the others. The beast charged. It moved fast, too fast for something so large. Elias barely dodged, rolling to the side as its claws slashed through the air. He grabbed a broken metal rod from the ground, holding it like a spear. It wasn't much, but it was better than nothing. The beast snarled and attacked again, its fangs snapping inches from his face. Elias dodged, but the creature's tail whipped around and struck him hard. He hit the ground with a grunt, pain shooting through his ribs. Above him, the nobles laughed. To them, he was already defeated. But Elias wasn't done. He quickly analyzed the beast, its movements, its weaknesses. He noticed that its armor had gaps near the joints. That was his chance. As the beast lunged again, Elias sidestepped at the last moment, causing it to slam into a stone pillar. Before it could recover, he drove the metal rod into the soft flesh near its shoulder joint. The beast howled in pain. Blue blood splattered onto the ground. The crowd fell silent. Elias didn't stop. He jumped onto the creature's back, gripping the rod with all his strength. The beast thrashed, trying to shake him off, but Elias held on. He pulled the rod deeper, twisting it, cutting through muscle and nerves. With a final shudder, the beast collapsed. For a long moment, there was silence. Then the crowd erupted into cheers and shouts of disbelief. No one had expected the human to win. Elias stepped off the creature's body, breathing heavily, his uniform stained with blue blood. He looked up at the queen. Her golden eyes were unreadable, but there was something there, a flicker of admiration, or perhaps respect. The Xilari warrior from before spoke again, his voice filled with disbelief. "You have passed the first test." Elias wiped the sweat from his brow. That was only the first. The warrior smirked. Yes, the real challenge begins now. The arena shifted again, revealing new dangers. The ground cracked open, revealing a pit of moving energy barriers that could disintegrate anything they touched. Giant mechanical constructs rose from the floor, their sharp limbs whirring with deadly speed. Elias exhaled sharply. This was far from over. From her throne, Queen Syraxa leaned forward. For the first time, a small, intrigued smile appeared on her lips. "This human," she murmured, "is full of surprises." Elias wiped the sweat from his brow, his chest rising and falling as he caught his breath. The massive beast he had slain lay still, its blue blood pooling on the arena floor. He had survived the first test, but the real challenge had just begun. Above him, the auxiliary nobles whispered among themselves, some in shock, others in anger. A mere human had defeated a creature that had torn apart many warriors before him. To them, it was impossible. Yet, on her throne, Queen Syraxa remained silent, her golden eyes fixed on Elias. There was something in her gaze, curiosity, perhaps even a hint of admiration. The auxiliary warrior overseeing the trial stepped forward. His dark exoskeleton shimmered under the arena lights. "You have survived the first challenge, human," he announced. "But your true test begins now." Elias clenched his fists, pushing past his exhaustion. He had expected this. The auxiliary would not be impressed so easily. The ground beneath him rumbled. With a loud grinding sound, the arena shifted once again. The walls moved, new structures emerged, and the battlefield transformed. Stone pillars collapsed, forming bridges and pathways over a deadly pit of shifting energy barriers. A single misstep would mean instant death. Then the mechanical constructs rose from the ground. They were tall and deadly, their metallic bodies sleek and armored. Each one had multiple sharp limbs, moving with an eerie precision. Their glowing red eyes locked onto Elias, scanning him like a predator sizing up its prey. Elias took a slow breath. He had no weapons, no armor, only his mind and his instincts. The first machine lunged. Its razor-sharp limbs slashed through the air, aiming for his head. Elias ducked just in time, rolling forward as the blade cut the space where he had just been. He grabbed a broken metal shard from the ground, small, but sharp enough to be useful. The second machine attacked from behind. Elias barely managed to twist away, the tip of its blade slicing across his sleeve. Too close. He needed a plan. Fighting them head-on would be suicide. Then he noticed something, a weak point. Each machine had a small power core on its back, protected but not completely hidden. If he could reach it. The first machine struck again, and this time, Elias used it against itself. He dodged at the last second, causing the construct's blade to stab into the stone pillar beside him, trapping it for a brief moment. That was all he needed. With a burst of speed, Elias leaped onto its back, gripping the armor plating. The construct whirred, trying to shake him off. But he held on. Using his metal shard, he jammed it into the power core, twisting with all his strength. A loud crackling sound filled the air, followed by a small explosion. The construct shuddered violently, its red eyes flickering before it collapsed, lifeless. The crowd gasped. Elias didn't stop to celebrate. The second construct was already attacking, its blade slicing down toward him. He rolled away, barely avoiding the deadly strike. His mind raced. He needed another advantage. That's when he saw the shifting energy barriers in the pit below. They moved in a rhythmic pattern, appearing and disappearing in precise intervals. An idea formed in his mind. Elias ran toward the pit, the second construct following closely behind. He timed his steps carefully, leaping onto a narrow stone bridge just as the deadly barriers moved apart. The construct pursued him without hesitation. Now or never. Just as Elias reached the edge, he jumped aside at the last second, and the construct, unable to stop in time, stepped directly into the shifting energy field. A bright flash of light erupted, followed by a deep, crackling hum. The construct's metallic body was instantly vaporized, leaving nothing behind. Silence fell over the arena. Elias stood on the remaining platform, breathing hard but victorious. Then, a slow clap echoed through the chamber. Elias looked up. It was Queen Syraxa. She had risen from her throne, her golden eyes shining. Her expression was unreadable, but there was no denying the interest in her gaze. "He has passed the second trial," she declared, her voice smooth but powerful. "And he has done so with intelligence, not just brute force." The auxiliary nobles murmured among themselves, some looking displeased, others intrigued. Elias wiped his brow and took a deep breath. He had won this round. But he knew this wasn't over. Syraxa stepped forward, her gaze never leaving him. Then, in a voice just loud enough for him to hear, she said, "You are proving yourself human." Elias met her gaze, his heart still racing. "I intend to." The queen's lips curled into a small, knowing smile. Above them, the auxiliary nobles and warriors watched in silence. Something had changed in that moment. Elias stood in the center of the arena, breathing heavily, his muscles aching from the brutal trial. The air still smelled of burnt metal from the destroyed machines, and the pit of shifting energy barriers hummed softly below. He had passed the second test, but he knew it wasn't over. Above him, the auxiliary nobles whispered among themselves. Some were furious. A mere human had survived not one but two deadly challenges. Others were intrigued. No one had expected this outcome. And then, there was Queen Syraxa. She stood at the edge of her throne, her golden eyes locked onto Elias. She had watched his every move, studied his decisions. She was not disappointed. Elias met her gaze, his mind sharp despite his exhaustion. He could tell this wasn't just a trial for humanity's survival anymore. This had become personal. Syraxa raised a hand, and silence fell over the arena. "You have done well, human," she said, her voice smooth but powerful. "You have proven strength, intelligence, and adaptability." She descended the steps of her throne, walking toward the edge of the arena. Every step was graceful yet commanding, the auxiliary nobles parting in her wake. Elias watched as she approached, her tall form casting a long shadow over him. Up close, he could see the fine details of her sapphire blue exoskeleton, the golden patterns etched into her armor-like plating. She was both beautiful and terrifying. Then she spoke again. "You have passed 2 trials, but the third will be different." Elias tensed. How different? Syraxa tilted her head slightly, a small smirk playing at the corner of her lips. "The first 2 trials tested your body and mind. The final trial will test your spirit." Elias narrowed his eyes. "And how do you plan to do that?" She gestured with one hand. The arena shifted once more, but this time, no mechanical constructs appeared, no beasts emerged from the shadows. Instead, a single figure stepped forward. It was auxiliary warrior, tall, powerful, and unmistakably elite. His 4 glowing eyes burned with determination, and his armor was adorned with symbols of past victories. A curved bladed staff rested in his hands, humming with energy. "This is General Kalzar," Syraxa said, "my most trusted warrior." Elias exhaled slowly. He already knew what this meant. Kalzar gripped his weapon tightly, stepping onto the battlefield. "You fight me, human," he said, his deep voice filled with confidence. "Not for survival, but for something greater." Elias glanced up at Syraxa. "And what exactly am I fighting for?" Syraxa's golden eyes glowed softly. "A place beside me." The arena fell into complete silence. Even the auxiliary nobles looked stunned. This was no longer just a test. This was a challenge with a greater purpose, one that none of them had expected. Elias, however, remained calm. He had seen battle before. He had faced impossible odds. And now he would face this warrior. Kalzar twirled his weapon, the energy along the blade sparking dangerously. Let's see if you truly deserve the queen's favor. Elias took a slow breath, his hands tightening into fists. Then the duel began. Kalzar moved first, his speed shocking for someone of his size. The bladed staff sliced through the air toward Elias's head. He barely dodged, ducking under the strike as he rolled away. Elias had no weapon. He was outmatched in strength and technology. But he had one advantage, his ability to adapt. Kalzar struck again, this time with a downward slash meant to end the fight immediately. Elias sidestepped, using the warrior's momentum against him. He grabbed a broken piece of metal from the ground and swung it at Kalzar's arm. The Xilari blocked easily, knocking Elias backward with a powerful kick. Elias hit the ground hard, pain shooting through his ribs. But he forced himself up, refusing to stay down. He had come too far to lose now. Kalzar smirked. You fight well, but you are still only human. Elias wiped blood from his lip. Yeah. Let's test that theory. This time, he attacked first. He moved fast, unpredictable, forcing Kalzar to react instead of control the fight. He ducked under a strike, slid between the warrior's legs, and grabbed a handful of sand, throwing it at Kalzar's glowing eyes. The Xilari warrior staggered back, momentarily blinded. Elias didn't waste time. He grabbed Kalzar's own weapon, using the staff's weight against him. In a single fluid motion, he swept Kalzar's legs out from under him. The warrior hit the ground, stunned. Silence filled the arena. Elias stood over him, breathing heavily, gripping the staff. He had won. Above, Syrax's lips curved into a small, satisfied smile. Kalzar exhaled and slowly rose to his feet. He looked at Elias for a long moment before giving a slow, respectful nod. You have my respect, human. Syraxa stepped forward. And mine. Elias met her gaze. So what now? She held out a hand toward him. Now, you stand beside me. The crowd erupted into shocked murmurs. No human had ever been given such an honor. Elias hesitated for a moment. Then, with steady determination, he took her hand. A new future had begun. Elias stood before Queen Syraxa, his fingers still tingling from the firm grip of her hand. The arena was silent, the weight of what had just happened settling over the Xilari nobles like a storm cloud. No human had ever stood beside a Xilari queen. No outsider had ever been acknowledged as a worthy equal. Yet, here he was. Kalzar, the Xilari general he had just defeated, stepped back and bowed his head slightly, not in shame, but in respect. His four glowing eyes studied Elias carefully. You fought well, human. You surprised me. Elias exhaled, rolling his aching shoulder. I get that a lot. Queen Syraxa observed him, her golden eyes filled with something unreadable. Then, with a simple movement, she turned and began walking toward the great doors of the arena, motioning for Elias to follow. He hesitated only for a moment before stepping forward, his boots echoing against the stone floor. The murmurs of the crowd grew louder behind him, whispers filled with both shock and curiosity. As he walked beside Syraxa, she spoke without looking at him. You were not expected to succeed, Elias. He smirked slightly. Yeah, I figured. She glanced at him, her lips curving into a small, knowing smile. And yet you did. That changes things. They stepped into a vast corridor, lined with towering Xilari warriors in ceremonial armor. Their piercing eyes followed Elias with caution, but none made a move against him. They were bound by Syraxa's will, and she had already made her decision. They arrived in a grand chamber, not as vast as the arena, but just as imposing. The walls shimmered with ancient carvings, glowing softly as if alive. A massive holographic map hovered in the air, displaying countless star systems. Elias crossed his arms, studying it. So, what now? You already have an empire. Why bring me into it? Syraxa stepped forward, tracing a clawed finger along the edge of the map. Because our war is far from over. Elias's expression hardened. War? She nodded. The Xilari are strong, but we are not the only power in the galaxy. She motioned toward a cluster of red-marked star systems. A new enemy has begun to rise, a species known as the Dravoth. Elias frowned. Never heard of them. Kelzar, who had entered behind them, spoke in a grim tone. Few have. They exist beyond the known territories. But now they come for us, and they do not conquer like warriors. They consume. Elias glanced at Siraxa. And you think I can help with that? The queen turned to him fully, studying his face as if searching for something. You have already proven that you can stand where others fall. The Dravoth are unlike any enemy we have faced. We need a new way to fight them. A new perspective. Elias exhaled slowly. He had come here as a captive, fought as a survivor, and now he was being asked to be something more. He rubbed his chin. All right. Suppose I say yes. Suppose I help you. What happens next? Siraxa stepped closer, her golden eyes locking onto his. Then you will be more than a warrior. You will be my champion. Elias raised an eyebrow. Champion. Kelzar nodded. The queen does not offer this lightly. A champion is more than just a soldier. You will have authority, command, and responsibility. You will not just fight. You will lead. Elias let out a short laugh, shaking his head. You're asking a lot from one guy. Siraxa's voice softened just slightly. I do not ask. I offer. Elias met her gaze, and for the first time, saw something beneath the surface. She was not just a ruler looking for another warrior. She was searching for something more. A true ally, perhaps even a partner. The weight of the moment settled over him. He thought about Earth, about his home. He had been a soldier, a survivor. But what had Earth ever done for him? He had fought battles that no one remembered. He had been abandoned, left to die in the cold depths of space. And yet here, among the Xilari, he had found respect, challenge, and purpose. Elias extended his hand toward Siraxa. All right, Your Majesty. I'm in. A flicker of satisfaction crossed her features as she grasped his hand once more, sealing the agreement. Kelzar stepped forward. Then you must prepare, champion. The Dravoth are coming, and we must be ready. Elias exhaled sharply. Then let's not waste time. Siraxa's lips curled into a small smile. Good, because war waits for no one. Above them, the map shifted, displaying the vast battle ahead. And Elias knew this was only the beginning. Elias stood before the large table in Siraxa's war room, studying the detailed map that flickered before him. The galaxy was vast, but the Dravoth threat was spreading rapidly. Small, scattered systems were falling to the unknown enemy, their colonies disappearing without a trace. The map's red markers symbolized the regions already lost. It was clear the Dravoth were systematic, merciless, and efficient. Siraxa stood beside him, her golden eyes scanning the map with the focus of a predator. Her calm demeanor made it difficult for Elias to believe just how much pressure rested on her shoulders. She was the queen of a mighty empire, yet the Dravoth were a threat unlike anything the Xilari had faced before. This is our greatest test yet, Siraxa said softly, her voice steady. The Dravoth do not simply conquer, they consume. Whole worlds vanish. Elias turned his gaze to her. You think I'm the key to stopping them? She didn't look at him, but her voice was clear. I do. Kelzar, who had been silently standing at the back of the room, nodded gravely. It is not just your skills in battle that make you valuable, Elias. It is your mind, your adaptability, and your ability to think differently. That is what the Dravoth do not expect. They think only in one way, to destroy. But you, he paused, studying Elias. You see things in a new light. Elias couldn't help but feel a sense of pride swell within him. It wasn't just his strength or his tactics that had earned him a place here. It was his way of thinking that had made him stand out. He had survived everything that Xilari had thrown at him. And now, it seemed, his humanity was becoming an asset. Syrax's voice cut through his thoughts. We need to unite the forces of the Xilari, Elias. But first, we must confront the Dravoth directly. We cannot wait for them to strike again. Our first objective is to send a warning. Show them we are not afraid. Elias looked at the map again. And how do you plan to do that? The Dravoth don't seem like the type to care about threats. Syrax's lips curled slightly. That is true. But they will care when we strike first. She turned to Kalzar. Gather the fleet. We leave for Velora within the hour. Velora was a border system, a place far enough from the core to be considered expendable by most empires, but it was also strategically important. The Dravoth had recently begun sending small attacks to probe its defenses. If they could push back the Dravoth here, it would send a message to the rest of the galaxy. Kalzar saluted and immediately left the room to carry out Syrax's orders. As they approached the planet, the horizon began to shift. Velora's skies were darkened by the shadow of enemy ships. The Dravoth had already arrived. Elias felt his heart race as he stared out the window. The Dravoth fleet wasn't just large, it was terrifying. Dark, angular ships that seemed to blend with the void of space. The Dravoth didn't need to make a show of their presence. Their ships were cold, efficient, and deadly. Kalzar entered the command room, his expression grim. They're here. We are outnumbered, but not outmatched. Elias turned to him, his eyes sharp. We'll need to use every advantage we've got. Syraxa raised her hand, and the room went silent. Our first objective is to break through their defenses around the planet. We will strike fast and hard. The Dravoth are not used to facing an enemy that doesn't run from them. Her voice was steady, but Elias could sense the weight of the moment in her tone. This was not just a battle. It was a fight for survival. For their future. The fleet's battle commanders began issuing orders, and soon, the massive warships began their approach. The horizon's edge led the charge, its weapons primed and ready. The battle had begun. Elias strapped himself into a seat in the command room, the familiar weight of the Xilari armor settling on his shoulders. He could feel the hum of the ship's engines, a steady pulse that matched his heartbeat. He wasn't alone anymore. He was with Syraxa, Kalzar, and the Xilari warriors. This was a fight for all of them. As they neared the enemy fleet, Elias watched the Dravoth ships begin to move. Their fleet wasn't as large as theirs, but the Dravoth's ships were faster and more maneuverable. They seemed to know exactly how to exploit weaknesses, and Elias could see the subtle movements of their ships in the distance. Tactical precision. Prepare for engagement, Syrax's voice rang out across the ship. Then the fleet fired. The battle erupted with an intensity Elias had never imagined. Explosions shook the ships as laser fire and missiles filled the air. The Dravoth's ships darted in and out of the shadows, appearing and disappearing like ghosts. But the Xilari were not unprepared. Their ships fired back with pinpoint accuracy, turning the dark void into a deadly dance of lights and explosions. Elias's heart pounded in his chest. He was not a pilot, but he could feel the ship lurch as it moved through the battle. The horizon's edge was dodging incoming fire while launching devastating counterattacks. Hold steady, Kalzar's voice rang through the comms. We must break their front lines. Do not falter. Elias could see the battle unfolding outside, the Xilari ships engaging the Dravoth head-on. It was chaos, ships weaving in and out, lasers flashing, explosions lighting up the darkness. The battle for Velora had begun. Syrax's ship moved through the battle like a predator. Her tactics were swift and ruthless. They took out the Dravoth's communication ships, cutting off their ability to coordinate. Elias watched in awe as Xilari ships moved with incredible precision, turning the tide in their favor. The Dravoth might have the numbers, but they didn't have the strategy. Elias's eyes darted between the tactical map and the chaos outside. He saw openings in the Dravoth's defenses, weaknesses they had missed. It was his turn. Syraxa, Elias said, his voice steady. I have a plan." She looked at him, her eyes meeting his with a mixture of curiosity and trust. "I'm listening. We can split their fleet. If we create a diversion, feign a retreat. They'll chase us, thinking we're vulnerable. But when they do, we hit them from behind, cutting off their escape." Syrax's lips curled into a small smile. "I like your thinking, Elias. Make it happen." The next few moments felt like a blur. Elias took the lead in coordinating the diversion. The auxiliary ships began to pull back, their movements deliberate. The Dravoth, hungry for a victory, took the bait. As they pursued, Elias gave the signal. The auxiliary fleet turned on them, launching a full counterattack from behind. The Dravoth fleet was now caught in a trap. Explosions erupted as the auxiliary ships closed in, tearing apart the Dravoth ships one by one. The battle for Valora had turned in their favor. Elias watched as Syrax's flagship struck the final blow to the Dravoth's command ship, tearing it apart in a brilliant flash of light. The Dravoth fleet was scattered, their momentum broken. "We've won," Elias whispered. Syrax's voice came through the comms, calm and resolute. "Yes, but this war is far from over." Elias nodded, understanding the weight of her words. The Dravoth might have been defeated at Valora, but the galaxy was vast, and their enemies would not rest. But for now, they had secured a victory, a step closer to the future they all fought for. To be continued. As they approached the planet, the horizon began to shift. Valora's skies were darkened by the shadow of enemy ships. The Dravoth had already arrived. Elias felt his heart race as he stared out the window. The Dravoth fleet wasn't just large, it was terrifying. Dark, angular ships that seemed to blend with the void of space. The Dravoth didn't need to make a show of their presence. Their ships were cold, efficient, and deadly. Kelzar entered the command room, his expression grim. "They're here. We are outnumbered, but not outmatched." Elias turned to him, his eyes sharp. "We'll need to use every advantage we've got." Syraxa raised her hand, and the room went silent. "Our first objective is to break through their defenses around the planet. We will strike fast and hard. The Dravoth are not used to facing an enemy that doesn't run from them." Her voice was steady, but Elias could sense the weight of the moment in her tone. This was not just a battle. It was a fight for survival, for their future. The fleet's battle commanders began issuing orders, and soon, the massive warships began their approach. The horizon's edge led the charge, its weapons primed and ready. The battle had begun. Elias strapped himself into a seat in the command room, the familiar weight of the auxiliary armor settling on his shoulders. He could feel the hum of the ship's engines, a steady pulse that matched his heartbeat. He wasn't alone anymore. He was with Syraxa, Kelzar, and the auxiliary warriors. This was a fight for all of them. As they neared the enemy fleet, Elias watched the Dravoth ships begin to move. Their fleet wasn't as large as theirs, but the Dravoth's ships were faster and more maneuverable. They seemed to know exactly how to exploit weaknesses, and Elias could see the subtle movements of their ships in the distance. Tactical precision. "Prepare for engagement," Syrax's voice rang out across the ship. Then the fleet fired. The battle erupted with an intensity Elias had never imagined. Explosions shook the ships as laser fire and missiles filled the air. The Dravoth's ships darted in and out of the shadows, appearing and disappearing like ghosts. But the auxiliary were not unprepared. Their ships fired back with pinpoint accuracy, turning the dark void into a deadly dance of lights and explosions. Elias's heart pounded in his chest. He was not a pilot, but he could feel the ship lurch as it moved through the battle. The horizon's edge was dodging incoming fire while launching devastating counterattacks. "Hold steady." Kelzar's voice rang through the comms. "We must break their front lines. Do not falter." Elias could see the battle unfolding outside, the auxiliary ships engaging the Dravoth head-on. It was chaos. Ships weaving in and out, lasers flashing, explosions lighting up the darkness. The battle for Valora had begun. Syrax's ship moved through the battle like a predator. Her tactics were swift and ruthless. They took out the Dravoth's communication ships, cutting off their ability to coordinate. Elias watched in awe as Scifi ships moved with incredible precision, turning the tide in their favor. The Dravoth might have the numbers, but they didn't have the strategy. Elias's eyes darted between the tactical map and the chaos outside. He saw openings in the Dravoth's defenses, weaknesses they had missed. It was his turn. "Syraxa," Elias said, his voice steady. "I have a plan." She looked at him, her eyes meeting his with a mixture of curiosity and trust. "I'm listening. We can split their fleet. If we create a diversion, feign a retreat. They'll chase us, thinking we're vulnerable. But when they do, we hit them from behind, cutting off their escape." Syrax's lips curled into a small smile. "I like your thinking, Elias. Make it happen." The next few moments felt like a blur. Elias took the lead in coordinating the diversion. The Scifi ships began to pull back, their movements deliberate. The Dravoth, hungry for a victory, took the bait. As they pursued, Elias gave the signal. The Scifi fleet turned on them, launching a full counterattack from behind. The Dravoth fleet was now caught in a trap. Explosions erupted as the Scifi ships closed in, tearing apart the Dravoth ships one by one. The battle for Valora had turned in their favor. Elias watched as Syrax's flagship struck the final blow to the Dravoth's command ship, tearing it apart in a brilliant flash of light. The Dravoth fleet was scattered, their momentum broken. "We've won," Elias whispered. Syrax's voice came through the comms, calm and resolute. "Yes, but this war is far from over." Elias nodded, understanding the weight of her words. The Dravoth might have been defeated at Valora, but the galaxy was vast, and their enemies would not rest. But for now, they had secured a victory, a step closer to the future they all fought for. To be continued.